everybody, and welcome to Case Manager Connections podcast. I am Kay, I am your host, and today I have a wonderful guest. She's very talented and she's very smart. Um, Without me wasting any time, I will let her introduce herself. So, special guest, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mariam Imohi. I am a social worker here in Maryland. I currently work at HopeWorks, where I serve as the Anti Trafficking Department Director. So I lead a team that provides services to survivors of human trafficking. Regarding human trafficking, we do a lot of intensive case management, community case management, safety planning, advocacy. We also offer emergency housing for survivors of human trafficking. We also do a lot of community engagement, community outreach, prevention, and yeah, that kind of stuff. So
Wow.
I'm really excited to be here with Kay.
Yes,
We've known each other for a very long time, so it's nice for us to connect on this level as well.
absolutely. And human trafficking is a lot of people don't understand that human trafficking is a big deal.
Yeah.
It happens anywhere. People think it happens in third world countries. People
Hmm.
think it happens in in local areas, but it happens. It can happen anywhere in your backyard.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of people that don't know about human trafficking. So, if somebody was to ask you, Mariam, what is human trafficking? How would you define human trafficking?
Yeah, you said it all. Human trafficking, at the most basic level I can put it, is exploitation,
Mhm.
right? So there are different forms. The two major forms are sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So when we talk about trafficking, people really think that human trafficking is like abductions, right? When
Mhm.
you're, at the grocery store in a mall and people are like scared to go to their car because of, they're going to get abducted, they're going to get human trafficked, right? People do get abducted. Abductions really happen, but that's not what we see in the field of human trafficking. Human trafficking, it entails three major components where there has to be force, fraud, or coercion. So that means somebody is being forced to do something against their will. There can be some type of fraud and coercion. When it comes to pretty much like sex trafficking, people tend to think like, oh, well, survivors are, sex workers or prostitutes and things like that. That's a choice, right? Some people choose to, engage in sex work, but a lot of times when people are being, sexually trafficked, there's a pimp or there's a trafficker who
Mhm.
is forcing them to do these things. So the biggest point I would say is when it comes to human trafficking, it has to be you can't stop whatever it is that you're doing on your own without there being any fear. So it's somebody instilling fear, there's somebody imposing fear on you, like if you stop, I'm going to do this, or this. And then there's a part of coercion, right, where it's kind of like, oh, if you come work for me, you would get XYZ, right? You start the work and you don't get XYZ and you can't leave, right? And then there are other components too, which is like, people get hooked on drugs, like the traffickers impose certain, negative experiences, like, getting folks hooked on drugs or threatening their friends and family members. So there are a lot of things that go into it. I mean, even when we look at it like more closer to home, parents traffic their kids, right? Sometimes bills need to be paid, needs need to be met. So they're like, hey, you can, have your way with my child or my whatever, at that point, and that becomes trafficking. So it happens all the time. People just don't recognize it because of what's being told in the media and what's been shared on the news, like, oh, abductions and be careful, don't, watch where you're going because somebody's going to kidnap you and, human traffic you. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of ways it happens. One last point, even immigrants, right? A lot of us migrated here from other countries. You have folks that help you process your papers and things like that. Oh, if you come to this country, we'll find you a job, we'll find you this, we'll find you that. And you get here and then they seize your passport and like all of your documents to force you to, either work or, do something on their behalf, something that they profit from. So human trafficking is just like this art of exploitation, and just taking advantage of very vulnerable people.
And you're right about that. Vulnerable people are at risk. And my background, I was a case manager with Baltimore City Department of Social Services, and I worked in the foster care division, and I had young teenagers,
Mm,
and I had I'll tell you a story. I had a young lady. who was promised by, I guess, a boyfriend
Yeah.
that she would become a star. She was 16 years old, that I want to be a model. And he took her to California to be a, to be a prostitute.
Yeah.
And we had to get the LAPD. She called and said, "Look, I'm in a hotel. I need help." So yeah, we found a way to get her back to Maryland, which was, that's how some adults use various types of tactics
Yep.
to take at-risk girls or boys into this type of lifestyle.
Yeah.
I also had another case with two young men who are transgender. They were also trafficked, and they were only 16 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mariam, so what are the dangers that face some of your victims at your program, and
Yeah.
what type of how do you protect them from getting back out there in the streets or back to the hands of the traffickers?
Yeah. Great question. So some of the things that survivors have shared with us are even just transitioning, right? So folks, live in this life where, they have thousands of dollars coming in from whatever sector, right? Either sex trafficking or labor trafficking, whichever way, they have access to a lot of money. They only have to worry about whatever the trafficker tells them to do, right? So they don't have to worry about the things we worry about, like bills and taking care of other people, and all I have to do is worry about themselves, staying safe, and listening to their traffickers, which is so ironic because their traffickers inflict harm and, danger on them anyway, right? But those are kind of like their only worries. So when they come to our kind of program, living in communal living in a shelter or an emergency shelter where there are other people, that poses a lot of issues for folks because they're not used to that, not really having money at their disposal like they once did, having to fend for themselves, like paying bills, looking for work, right? Folks probably get a job. We know by the time taxes takes their cut, Uncle Sam takes his money, we have bills, we have this, we're only left with a certain amount. And folks like, what is this? I could be, back in the life and earning 3, 4 times this, and I have to worry about all this stuff. So it's just a lot of that, just like the lifestyle change, right? Some of the street language that I use are returning to a square life. So those of us who work 9 to 5 and pay bills and all that, we're squares, and we live in
Mhm.
this square world that they don't want to conform to because it's too much work. When they could just do dates and obey their trafficker, and all is well. So those are some of the things. Other things are the risk of their trafficker locating them. Traffickers have a wide network because
Mhm.
they want to keep that control and kind of know what's going on at all times. So when somebody leaves their
Mhm.
stable or their, domain, they're probably going to be searched for. So there's a lot of, worry and fear around that. And then to answer your piece about preventing folks from going back into the life, personally, and which is part of the reasons why I'm really happy that I'm at HopeWorks, we are really big on honoring folks' self-determination, right? So we never encourage people, we never coerce people, we never really encourage folks to not go back into the life because that's their decision. We're just here to support them in whatever, choice they want to make and whatever lifestyle decisions they choose to make for themselves. But for them to know that we're here to support them regardless of what they do. If they go back and then they come back to us for help, we'll still help you, and we're still here to help you, create the better life that you want for yourself.
Wow, wow. So how do you guys, for example, how do you guys get a case? What is the intake? Take us through the intake process. Do you guys have partnerships with law enforcement? Because I'll say this: when I was working at DSS, we had, like, when we have intake cases, sometimes FBI agent is on the case, or somebody from Department of Homeland Security is on the case. So what are you guys? What is your intake process? What are your process? What is the process of
Yeah.
somebody coming into your program?
So we have a lot of different processes. So I would say, our we because anti-trafficking is a separate thing, we are kind of connected to the residential piece because when folks come in for emergency housing, they do intake with them, right? But we are connected to law enforcement. So we work with Howard County Police Department,
Okay.
and they are a really good set of people who have done a lot of training and who are really, trauma sensitive around what folks experience either in their trafficking situation or after they're recovered. And a lot of times survivors, have to detox, right, from, being hooked on so many different substances. So currently what happens is we, might get contacted by HPD that they got a tip from somewhere
Mhm.
about an operation they, want to go check out to see if, there's some trafficking activity. So once they do that, they let us know, and then we are kind of like on standby to meet with clients and offer them services. Pre-COVID, they would come to our main office, or police would bring them to our main office to meet with us in person. We kind of like talk about, what they, are looking for, what kind of services we can provide for them. If not in-house, we, refer out to like other organizations we either have partnerships with or that we frequently refer to. Um, Other ways, we have a hotline. So we are connected to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, where folks will call and then they'll reach out to us like, hey, you guys are local to the survivor. Here's what they need. Are you guys able to provide any services to them? And then, people just walk in.
Wow.
When main office was open, we'd have folks just come in and be like, hey, I'm, in a really tough situation. I need help. And then, we would sit with them and again, like go through everything, their goals or whatever, how to keep them safe, safety plan. And that's really the biggest part is that safety planning piece, because we
Mhm.
safety plan with folks all the time, whether they're, in shelter, in the community, or just calling on the hotline. They don't want to leave, but they need to figure out how to keep themselves safe, right? So working from that harm reduction model of, okay, here's the best way we can help you without you leaving. And here are some tips to keep yourself safe in whatever situation you choose to stay in.
Wow. And what is the duration of one of your victims that come to your program? Is it 6 months? Is it a year for transitioning from your program to back into the community? So what is the duration of a stay at your program?
Yeah, so for our emergency shelter, it is a 60-day stay. So folks have a maximum of 60 days to be with us. So during that 60 days, they'll be working with a case manager that would help them with their housing needs, or connect them with other organizations that can, provide like maybe transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So we do all of that within 60 days. We try to. We do have an extended shelter where folks will go if they're like in the process of earning different entitlements, or they're waiting to get a housing voucher from, not like general housing voucher, because we know those can take several years, but like, there are some like disability housing vouchers that may take a few weeks and they just need somewhere to stay. So we'll move them to our extended shelter. Um, for us, for anti-trafficking specifically, we don't have a duration. So there's currently a client that we've been working with that's been with us for several months. I would say about like 17 or 18 months or so.
Mhm.
And folks just always know that they can always reach back out to us. So they may have their housing, they may have like, all the things they need in the moment. And then something might happen several months later down the line. And they're like, hey, we need some help. And
Mhm.
we're still there to, support them in whatever way we can. So
Wow. So what is the capacity at your program? Is it 100 people, or you guys have some capacity of how much clients that you can take in your program?
So right now, our emergency shelter is operating at 50% because of COVID. We can only have, so normally we are a 16-bed shelter at our emergency shelter. So right now we're filling about 7 to 8 beds, and that's families included. So we don't separate families. So we have a survivor. Typically, anti-trafficking, a lot of our survivors come single. They come as single people. They usually don't have kids. And if they do, their kids are usually pretty small, or really they usually don't bring them with them to shelter because they're already staying with family members or other people. But yeah, we don't separate families. So if a survivor comes in, they, bring their kids, they are housed in our shelter with their kids, but we count each body. We don't count like per family. So right now our shelter is currently full, and we are just working really hard to work with other shelters and other uh, providers in the area. But we don't only serve anti-trafficking survivors. We also serve individuals who are experiencing intimate partner violence and
Domestic
individuals who
violence. Okay.
experience who experience sexual violence. So like people who are, any sexual assault, gender-based violence, that kind of thing. So we have to kind of share our shelter
Okay.
space with a lot of different survivors. So we also have that lens on whenever we are, working with human trafficking survivors in terms of space and shelter.
Wow, that's a lot of trauma that you guys have to deal with because you're dealing with
Yeah.
victims that have seen a lot. And
Mhm.
in my own area, it was most likely just it was more of children, young teenagers who are trafficked, and
Yeah.
to find services for them, it's that's why we some of us do this job. So if
Yeah.
somebody wants to work at your place, what are the qualifications? Do they need to be a licensed social worker, or
Mhm.
they need to go through some training? I mean,
Mhm.
what do you need? What are the qualifications?
Yeah. So currently we're hiring for a few positions. We're hiring for our advocates, our residential advocates, and we are hiring for one of our case managers. So I think we're hiring for a rapid rehousing case manager, I believe, but it's on our website. So please go check it out. Folks do not need to be licensed. They don't have to be social workers. We accept folks at bachelor's level, but
Mhm,
we would prefer that folks speak a different language. So we would prefer bilingual folks.
mhm.
We would prefer folks who have some experience in human services, victim services, gender-based violence, um, yeah, that's pretty much it. The job descriptions are online as well. But
Mhm,
yeah, like we train folks and we really give, the support and the background for really working with a trauma heavy population,
mhm.
and also empowering folks to take care of themselves, right? Because for someone like me who's a social worker, I've worked in the field long enough to kind of know what it takes for me to take care of myself. But somebody who might be new to the field might need some help navigating that, right? And setting boundaries and being mindful of like, how to interact with clients. When is it okay to say, hey, I'm off? When is it okay to be like, I don't work on the weekends, right? So navigating all those different self-care practices, we also are really big on that as well.
Wow. And here's I have one more question. Like sometimes when I'm out in the community, I'm driving and I see kids outside playing in the yard, I mean in the front of the house with no adult supervision. I worry
Yeah,
about that. Like
yeah.
it's always my biggest worry. I see kids just playing, no adults sitting there watching them. What type of safety tips can you give to people out there? Because I think sometimes people don't think it could happen to them, because I don't let my wife buy gas at night. I tell her, don't buy gas at night. If you don't have gas, come on home. I will go and buy the gas for you. You know what I'm saying? What are the safety tips that you can give to people out there?
Yeah. Whew, there are a lot. There are a lot, I would say. But first thing I would say is starting all the way at the beginning, right? Of reducing the amount of vulnerabilities that children experience. Um, one thing I say fondly is a lot of people say, oh, marijuana is a gateway drug, alcohol is a gateway drug. No, trauma is a gateway drug, right?
Really?
When kids experience trauma, when kids are vulnerable,
Mhm.
that leaves the door wide open for exploitation.
Yes.
So I don't want to say I'm less worried about kids playing without supervision more than I'm worried about kids being left vulnerable, right? Emotionally, because it's easier at that point to penetrate those vulnerabilities than it is to just, snatch up a kid who's playing outside without
Mhm.
supervision, right? Kids
Yeah.
should always supervise their kids, but I feel like folks should minimize the amount of vulnerabilities that, children experience. Again, traffickers, people that exploit kids, they are very good and crafty at recognizing when kids don't have a need. Is it a need for love? Is it a need for attention? Is it a physical need for food, housing, shelter, gifts? Right? They are able to use those things as tools of manipulation and tactics to
You
get
know,
into those kids.
it's funny you said that because when we have runaways, we have to get
Yep,
them on time. We put out
yep,
we put them on AWOL
yep,
and we have to find them on time. Because I remember this, and I remember this clearly. I had two runaways, two young girls ran away from Baltimore County. And as soon as I made the 911 call, the detective at I think is missing person
Yep.
called me within no time. It was like, we're going to get them. And within
Mhm.
24 hours, they got those two girls. But they were housed at sex offender's house. They were staying there
Mhm.
because the detective was able to track one of my client's cell phone. They were
Mhm.
able to get those two girls within 24 hours. You
Mhm.
know, so it's funny that it's great that you said that, like, it's vulnerability, because they
Mhm.
look at your weak points
Right.
and see how they can take advantage and
Yep.
overpower you and make you
Mhm.
promises. They promise you the heavens, they promise you everything.
Yeah.
Just like my clients, they promised her she's going to be a movie star, a
Yeah.
Hollywood star, and she
Yeah.
hopped on the plane and went to California, but it was a
Yep.
lie. You
Mhm.
know, so it's vulnerability is definitely something they really take advantage of. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah.
wow, that's great. So let me ask you a question. Have you seen the movie Taken?
And you know what's funny? Every time I talk with folks about human trafficking, they're like, "But wait, so do you mean to tell me that the movie Taken was fake?" Or yeah, I've seen it. I'll let you finish your question.
The movie Taken it will open your eyes, because there was a part in the movie where one of the guys was like, if you don't get her within 24 to 48 hours, you might never see her again. You know, that's
Mhm.
why when someone goes missing, they put that Amber Alert,
Mhm.
or you know, you
Yeah.
have to find that person, because when they cross state lines,
Right.
it's very difficult, because you don't know where they're taking the
Right.
victim to. They can take them to another country,
Yep.
you know, because if you have you watched The Wire, I'm a big movie fanatic, right?
Yeah.
So they had the episode in The Wire season 2 where
Mhm.
at least a dozen women were trafficked from another country through the ports in
Yep.
the United States.
Yep.
So, you know, so victims are not just coming from the United States, they're coming from other countries. Do you
Mhm.
have any do you have any experience working with international like immigrants, like coming from another country? Do you have them at your program?
Yeah, so I mean that question is loaded, and those are some of my career goals, right? Is to eventually go from doing this work locally to an international front, right? And creating that awareness for people to know, like, hey, this is happening. And you said it perfectly, like where we are in Maryland, like we are so beautifully situated, right? Because we have the ports, we have I-95, we have like 3 or 4 major international airports that are all within Super Bowl, like so many different things that happen right over here where we are in the
Yes.
DMV. So it creates a lot of access for folks to come in and out very quietly,
Mhm.
right? So in terms of internationally, I haven't really seen a lot of international folks. And when we're talking about international, I want to be specific to say foreign nationals, like
Foreign.
individuals, yeah, who are either undocumented or are not, American born and raised. We haven't seen a lot, but there are a lot of illicit massage businesses that
Mhm.
front, that front as massage businesses that are really a cover for prostitution and, sexual for sex. I mean, yeah, for sex trafficking. So those are usually, ran by a lot of, Asian Pacific individuals, and a lot of the victims there are Asian or of, folks from the Asian region. So those are some of the, the research has really showed that, hey, these massage businesses are really taking advantage of folks who've come here from, the Asian region to create a better life for themselves and for their children, for their families, and they're being exploited. So back to that thing I said earlier, where folks would be like, oh yeah, I'll help you process your stuff to come to this
Mhm.
country, and you'll work and you'll earn money and all that stuff. So they do that, and then they come, oh yeah, you'll just be a masseuse. Like it's, people do it here, Americans love it, and then you get here and you find out that, oh, it's something completely different, and you can't go back,
Mhm.
you can't get any of your documents, so you're forced to, continue doing this work that, you want to walk away from.
And some I've heard stories, because I've watched a lot of documentaries on this,
Yeah.
where some of them will come from another country, and when they get here, the I guess the pimp or the person in charge of the whole program will notify them and say, hey, you owe us this amount.
Yep.
The only way you can
Yep.
pay us is
If
prostitution
you,
or
yep.
working in a warehouse or
Yep.
some type of form of hard, slavery,
Yeah.
or prostitution or whatever.
Yeah.
So there are ways that they victimize people coming from other countries.
Yep.
So they have various tactics, and
Yeah.
one have to be very careful. Here in the United States and in other countries as well.
Right.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And Taken is like one of those. I do appreciate it's. I appreciate that it's well meant, but that's part of what enforces that false notion of, oh, it's about abductions, right? And again, abductions do happen, but in my career I haven't worked with a survivor who was abducted.
yeah.
They usually know the trafficker. They
Mhm.
can give you the story and the scenario and the situation of how everything kind of happened and how it unfolded. They're like, oh yeah, like it was just, they can just tell you, narrate the whole thing so beautifully. And it's
Mhm.
not like, oh yeah, I was just out and then boom, I got kidnapped or I got abducted and then, so.
And it can happen. There's no age
No,
limit. It
no,
doesn't matter about your race.
no.
It doesn't matter about your gender.
Well,
Um,
one thing I want to say about the race piece
yes.
is that we do know that Black women are disproportionately, as always, right, with almost everything, are affected by human trafficking by default.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's another thing. And when we talk about human trafficking, there are a lot of individuals who are left out of that conversation. And then there's a lot of nuance in who are survivors of human trafficking and who are sex workers or who are prostitutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So prostitution is not legal, right? So who gets arrested? So if it's a Black woman who's being trafficked, she's more likely to be viewed as a prostitute or as a sex worker than a survivor of human trafficking or as a victim in that way, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of nuance around that and a lot of training that's also being done. Same thing with trans folks, right? Like we know trans youth are also probably at a higher risk
Mm-hmm.
of human trafficking than, a lot of other demographics as well. Trans kids, they come out to their parents or to their guardians, they don't approve, they kick them out, and then
Mm-hmm.
they have to survive on the
Survive.
streets.
Yeah.
Yeah. How else are you going to survive? Okay, well, I'm gonna do whatever I have to do. If this person's in charge, they take some of my money, but that's fine. Having some money is better than no money, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then they get caught up in that whole system too. So I do want to add that piece in there that Black and brown women, trans youth are more likely to be victimized than a lot of other demographics.
Wow. So do you have programs for youths at your program? Do you have programs
No.
catered to young adults?
Mm-mm. So our organization only serves individuals who are 18 and over.
Oh, okay.
But there are a lot of other, programs, agencies. So before coming to HopeWorks, I worked at Baltimore Child Abuse Center, and they do a lot of work
That's
around,
right. I forgot because you
yeah,
have that would go straight to the Department of Social Services. Correct.
yep,
You're right about
yep, because under 18, there doesn't need to be any forced fraud or
that.
coercion. Any child engaging any, sexual acts, for like for a commercial exchange, that's already child trafficking right there. And that would just usually go to the Child Advocacy
Oh,
Center
yes.
or DSS.
Yes,
Yep.
that's right. Wow, there's a lot to learn. And
Yeah.
really, what really opened my eyes was, watching Taken and see how quick that was. But most of us don't have the type of skills the father had, He was, he was able to travel.
Absolutely.
Yes, he was able to travel all the way to France and
Yeah.
find his daughter and fight off all the gangs.
Right.
Most of us can't do that.
Right.
So
Right.
we have to play it safe
Right.
as professionals. So
Right.
what do you do as a professional? How do you you don't take your work home at night? So I definitely know that. But how do you always you going to work every day and you just like,
Mm.
is this a safe job for me? Like, is there any
Mm.
safety issues? I mean, do you ever think about that?
Mm. Wow, that's such a good question. Whew, I can't say I haven't thought about it in
Hmm.
terms of like with especially with trafficking, but funny you say I don't take my work home with you. My work is home with me
Oh, that's right.
24/7 because we're
Home
all
working from
working
home, correct?
remote.
Yes.
But no, I absolutely understand what you're saying. I feel like I'm safe in my work because I feel like our organization definitely takes really good care of us.
Hmm.
And all of our locations are in confidential settings. So
Right.
the only location that is a pub that has a public address is our main office, and that's where my office is.
Hmm.
So our safe house, our extended shelters, all of that, the addresses are confidential. We don't release those addresses for anything.
Hmm.
So even when clients receive mail, they receive it to main office, and then we hand deliver it to the different, locations for folks. So yeah, I would say the biggest threat would be like that psychological harm, like that
Hmm.
secondary trauma, that burnout that comes from just working in a trauma heavy environment.
Hmm.
And again, a lot of it just comes down to really that self care. And self care has turned into like this buzzword, like a foo foo kind of like lay in a bathtub and drink tea and bubble bath, right? But it's really being unapologetic and intentional about your choices and being very mindful of boundaries, right? Letting clients know I don't work after a certain time. I will watch my phone ring at 8 p.m. Like I'm off,
Yes.
not bringing work home, not looking at my emails over the weekend, right? Like not giving out my personal cell unless it's an emergency. Like, so a lot of my staff and a lot of other staff know, like, hey, you can always call or text me. Text me first before you call if it's an emergency, right? Because my time off is my time off. It's time with my family. It's
Yes.
time with myself. It's time, with, I mean, I'm spiritual. So it's time, for me to, pray and do my other things that I do to take care of me. And before that's interjected with a call, I need to be notified so I can get my mind back in
Back
the
in.
fact that, okay, I'm about to talk about something traumatic or deal with potentially a crisis situation. I need to be on for that.
Wow. Wow. So how many people do you supervise currently?
So currently, we are currently hiring for my department. So we lost a few staff. There was some staff transition and a shuffle with the pandemic and all that. So we're hiring for my team. So currently it's just me. So we're hiring for my team. We're hiring a anti-trafficking case manager. We're hiring for 2 residential advocates.
Hmm.
And I believe we're hiring for our legal department. So if there are any attorneys listening, please.
In the
Um,
Maryland area.
Yes, in the Maryland area, specifically in Howard County. I live in Baltimore County, so I do commute to Howard like as needed. But yeah, it's not a bad drive.
Also, the attorney, what they do is advocate on behalf of the victims in court.
Hmm. Yep. So they do a
Oh,
lot
okay.
of that. They do a lot of assistance with like peace orders. Again, we work with folks
Yes.
who have domestic violence
Yes.
and a lot of that
Yes.
stuff. So yeah, they help with all of that. And, really helping with a lot of legislation, right? We need policy work to be done. We need legislative work to be done. So a lot of our attorneys work on that front as well.
Wow. Yeah. It's funny you said that. I went to the House of Ruth, and that place was secured. I
Yeah.
mean, cameras everywhere, security
Yeah.
guard outside, armed security guard. The
Hmm.
pro, I mean, it was,
Yeah.
they had to really, really go through. You have to show some identification,
Hmm.
because they don't want anybody just walking
Yeah.
in, so these places are definitely a safe haven for a lot
Hmm.
of victims. And I'm glad that, you are out there helping people. It doesn't matter in which capacity. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if you're a social worker, case manager, nurse.
Right.
We are going to
Yes.
see these types of issues,
Right.
and the thing is, I'm not even clinical, and I worked at the
Yeah.
government for 7 years, and I saw this
Mm.
every
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 months. It could
Yeah.
be on my case, it could be on somebody
Hmm.
else's case.
Hmm.
Somebody was trafficked, somebody was a
Yeah.
victim of human
Yeah.
trafficking, somebody was a victim of domestic violence, somebody that you work with. So if you work in this field, you are going to see somebody, you're going to come across somebody that's been a victim of human trafficking or
Right.
domestic violence. So even
Yeah.
a registered nurse at the hospital, you're going to see that. You're a doctor,
Yeah.
you're going to come
Yeah.
across people like that. So we are going to come across clients with these types of trauma. And
Yeah.
it takes a special person to provide services to them. When my individuals, I said my clients, when they were trafficked, we had to find clinical professionals for them, and they were already in the streets. They didn't want to listen. They want to go back out there. And this was a case that we were partnering with the Department of Homeland Security, Human Trafficking Task Force. So I had to make sure that my job was done,
Yes.
and the people was on the loose. The guy that trafficked them was still out there. They couldn't get him. So they were at risk. Me doing the visits, I was also at risk. Like, hey, I don't want to put them in my car and take them for intake, and he's right behind me. So, so this type of profession is definitely difficult, and it takes special people like you to do it. So thank you very much for working with the community and working with people, and giving them the best care they need and options to help them in their lives. So, and this is social work month too.
Yes.
Happy social work month.
Thank you. Happy social work month to you. It's when we think back to the history, right, of everything, and we look at even like something you just said, right, like it takes a special person, like it takes special people. We don't become social workers or caseworkers or nurses or helping professionals to become millionaires. If we wanted to do that, I would have kept playing basketball, or I would have, we would have done other things, because we can't say the compensation is all that. It's not. We can't say the accolades. People really don't recognize us all that much, right? So it just goes into the fact that, these people really do need that support. And if everybody, like even people who are not in the field, the vulnerabilities, like that's one thing I always share when I talk about safety tips. I don't know how we can all, but if you can minimize somebody's vulnerabilities, you have helped that person. You have created some prevention. You have helped that person be safe, right? If you met a need that they might have, right? You have helped them and helped prevented them from, potentially getting or being exploited. And we know that the history of the United States was built on trafficking, right? Slavery is labor trafficking. So we want to be also, provide that context when we're talking about such a heavy and tough subject of this is something that's happened for centuries, right? It's happened, over and over and over and over. And then this modern day slavery that's a little bit more like coerced and it looks a little bit different. And we have technology, and different things that kind of like mask some of the things, the folks, several years ago didn't have. It just creates that complication too. So it definitely takes special people. Thank you for all the work you've been doing as well and being, a leader in this field and putting all of us together and helping us really, have these hard conversations and dialogues and creating a lot of awareness around some of these topics that, people otherwise don't hear about.
All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you for joining in. You don't have, I can't really give the address where you work or your phone number, but, but if you need resources, I'll definitely put a hotline number on the video. So you guys can, if you have clients that are victims or you have any type of suspicion, that's a 1-800 number that you guys can call. But please like the video, please share the video, join the group, and we'll have more guests. If you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, please feel free to reach out to me or just comment below, and I'll catch you guys again on our next video. So Mariam, do you have any last words?
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone that tuned in. You can always visit our website at wearehopeworks.org. There's a lot of information on there, a lot of resources as well. And Katie's going to share some hotline info as well. So
awesome.
Thank
you very much. Take care, everybody. Bye. Bye.